Ames. She's a licensed clinical social worker, and you work in community mental health?
Yes, at South County Mental Health Center.
In what capacity?
I was an intern and then was one of the social workers on the unit.
Gotcha. What types of populations do you work with?
We served all of Palm Beach County. Typically, the underprivileged population that don't have resources, the chronically mentally ill. We did have one unit that was more mental health and one that was dual diagnosed, but the services weren't very adequate for the addiction side of things. It was a lot more just crisis stabilization.
Gotcha. And treating addiction is more of a long-term type approach?
Right, absolutely. Because there aren't resources, and this is one facility in all of Palm Beach County to serve the people who don't have resources, we just weren't equipped to deal with the high turnover, and there wasn't enough time for creating solid long-term discharge plans.
It seems like a challenging population to work with.
It was. I think that there were parts of it that are particularly enjoyable, and it makes you grateful for the things that you don't have. But there's a piece of it that's just heartbreaking to see. You really see for the first time the effects that a lack of money has on people with these illnesses.
Gotcha. And as a clinician, what are some things you did for your self-care? Because working with the chronically mentally ill, people that have inadequate resources to treat their significant mental health problems, what are some ways you cope with that?
Any particularly difficult times, leaning on my colleagues or going to my supervisor. We all sort of had this shared understanding and this shared experience. So I would use them to cope with anything that came up in terms of self-care. Also, just, if I'm tired and I'm on my way home and I don't want to talk on the phone anymore, putting the phone away, putting the music on, and just listening to my needs or how to recharge my batteries.
Gotcha. Do you have any advice for new clinicians going into work in community mental health settings?
One of the things that stood out for me when I first was an intern and sat down, it was community mental health at a crisis stabilization unit. And so it's a particularly sad population, just devastating to see what schizophrenia, for instance, how debilitating it can be. And one of the first meetings I went into, the people were making jokes about the patients, and it was like very dark. And I remembered sitting there thinking, like, I'm in the wrong place. Like, these people are so mean.
Right.
And then after the first few weeks, all of a sudden I realized how much these are the people who really, truly care, and that this sort of joking and dark humor was a way to cope with how sad the reality of what they were working in. So I would say if you're in a crisis stabilization type facility, to be prepared that you could see some of that. And then I think also being mindful of, you typically see a lot of these patients returning to the facility because, again, when the resources aren't there to set up a long-term plan for them to be successful, they often end up coming back in. And I remember my supervisor saying that people who get burned out are the people who get mad at the clients for being a client.
Gotcha. We have to expect the client to be sick when the nature of the disease is there's oftentimes relapse and readmission back into treatment.
Definitely.
Cool. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.